Oops, sorry, my fingerprint got in the way. Why do we use fingerprints to identify people, especially in the crime scene settings? Well, before fingerprints, we used to use the Bertillon method, which is where we would take 11 measurements of the body and compare those in the crime scenes, like the length of our forearm and the length of our ear. But as we discovered, some parts of our body continue growing, or we have the same multiple people can have the same measurements of that length. Francis Galton was the first person who made the largest dent in showing how important fingerprints were. He published the first fingerprint textbook titled Fingerprints. In his book, he discusses the anatomy of fingerprints, with the epidermis being the outer layer of skin, the dermis being the inner layer, and the dermaplatos being the binding between the epidermis and the dermis, and determines the form and pattern of our fingerprints. It is made in the fetus and is unchanged throughout life. He also shows that there are three categories where loops, which is where the fingerprint enters and exits from the same side, and only 65% of the world has. Whorls, which is made where the center has a little spiral inside of it, and 30 to 30% of the world has. And arches, which is where we enter and exit from opposite sides of the fingerprint, and only about 5% of the world has. He also shows that the likelihood of two people having the exact same fingerprint is a 1 in 64 billion chance, and so far none have been recorded. The US government and the FBI has the Integrated Automated Fingerprint Identification System, which is connected with the entire world to hold everyone's fingerprints to be able to be used in criminal cases and for storage in general. Now, when we get to a crime scene, what fingerprints are we normally looking for? Normally, the main form of fingerprints we find are latent prints, which are just impressions caused by the transfer of sweat, oils, and amino acids in the fingerprint ridges that have transferred onto surfaces. We first use the ultra-reflective imaging system, which is just a UV light, to be locating fingerprints without the aid of chemicals and powders to see them in their original form. Two ways that we can then transfer these fingerprints is with fingerprinting powder, where we dust the fingerprinting powder and then take the powder that has been stuck into the fingerprints with transfer tape and place it onto a ID card with the fingerprint to be able to take back to the lab for comparison. There's also iodine fuming, where we take any semi-porous surface like paper or cardboard and place it into a container with iodine crystals and close and seal it and heat it up so that the iodine fumes create the amino acids to react to turn brown, so you can see the fingerprints. Now that we have our fingerprints, we can take them back to the lab and we can identify them with an example copy. We do this through the ACE-V process. We first analyze the prints to see the quality of the print. We then compare to look for general ridges and pattern configuration and the location of the minutia, which is any small changes between two fingerprints. We then evaluate them with an examiner to see if they came from the exam source, and then we can make the conclusion if they were the same, different, or if we're unconclusive. We then have to verify with a second person. Thank you so much for listening to my video, and I hope you consider me.